84a, Pei Daled Amud Aleph, about a third of the way down. Omer of Yechanan. First one in line is Ano Ishtayri. Omer of Yechanan. Ano Ishtayri Mishapuri Yerushalayim. I remain from the beautiful men of Jerusalem. So the Gemara says, "Haiman de boy Metzia shufet Rabbi Yechanan." Someone who wants to see how the appearance, the facial appearance of Rabbi Yechanan, how should he see it? Nasi kasa de kaspi should take a silver cup, maybe a salki, straight from the silversmith. When Amalia partside derumna, and he should fill it with pomegranate seeds, sumka that are red. V'neheder like klila devar de sumka. He should encircle it with a bunch of red roses, the pume along the mouth of the cup, the lip of the cup. The noisib and shimshalatula, and he should put it in between the sun and the shades. It means don't put it directly in the shade, nor directly in the sun. Sort of put it in the space that's in between. Obviously, it's sort of a more cloudy day. Okay, hahu zaharuri, the shine, the glimmer from that cup. That's the sort of glimmer of Rabbi Yechanan's face. So the Gemara says, "Any can't be." Rabbi Yechanan was not so attractive. Why? We learned Shufr de Rav Kahana, Me'en Shufr de Rav. The appearance of Rav Kahana was something approximating the appearance of Rav. Shufr de Rav, Me'en Shufr de Yaakov Avinu. The appearance of Rav was some approximation of the appearance of Yaakov. And Shufr de Yaakov Avinu and Shufr de Adam Rishon. And Yaakov Avinu's appearance was sort of a vestige of the appearance of Adam Rishon, who had a near godly appearance. The Ela Rabbi Yechanan like a Choshev, and Rabbi Yechanan's not on this list. Why not? If Rabbi Yechanan was such a beautiful face, why isn't he on this list? So Gemara says, "Shana Rabbi Yechanan dahatris panam lehavila." Rabbi Yechanan did not have a beard. And because of that, he's not listed on that on the list before, even though he was very attractive. Rabbi Yechanan used to sit at a place where the woman who would come back from dipping in the mikvah would see him. Amar, he said, okay, so there's an interesting rule. That a woman who goes to the mikvah should not, when she leaves the mikvah, she should not look at a dog. Should be the first thing she looks at, because that means her children will look like dogs. So he would stand there, and he would say, "Just look at him," because this way they'll have children that are attractive and children that can study Torah.
Rabbi,
yes.
What if the dog is a pug?
Makes no difference.
Step carefully here, sir.
Just as bad.
There are public sensitivities at stake.
Just as bad. Makes no distinction.
Okay, that's it. You and I are going to have words after class, buddy.
Yep, that's what I figured. Yeah. Well, listen, at least your dog won't be insulted. That's fine.
More words than usual anyway.
I'm relating. So the rabbi said to him, "Aren't you concerned of sort of an evil eye?" Meaning that you're sort of proclaiming yourself as an attractive person. There can be people that view you doing this with a negative perception. Amr Lahusi says to him, "I'm not concerned about an evil eye. Why not? Often the children of Yosef, they're not susceptible to that type of damage." The Chsiv, as the verse states, "Ben Peres Yosef, Ben Peres Ale Oyen." But Amr Ravu explains, "Atikri Ale Oyen Elo Oile Ayin." The children of Yosef are Oile Ayin. They rise up on top of those with a negative view, so they're not susceptible to damage via this mechanism. Rabbi Yosef says, the children of Yosef were blessed by Yaakov Avinu to be the Yidgu L'Roiv B'Keref Ha'aretz. The Yidgu, it's an interesting word. It means they should multiply like fish. The root of the word is dug. The fish of the sea are covered by the water and the eye can't see them. The eye cannot cause damage to them. Okay. Given that Rabbi Yochanan did not have a beard and he was very attractive, that would sort of explain the next story, which we've mentioned numerous times over the years. Rabbi Yochanan was swimming in the Jordan River. Chazi Rish Lakish at that point was the thief, and he saw a clean-shaven man. He thought Rabbi Yochanan was a woman, so he jumped in. He jumped in Abbasrei to jump in after him. So Rabbi Yochanan was impressed with his strength, so he said to him, so your strength is for Torah learning. Amrlei, so Rish Lakish responded, Shufrach, your beauty lenoshi is fit for women. Amrlei, so Rabbi Yochanan says, if you start studying Torah, I'll let you marry my sister, who's even more attractive than I am. So he accepted that he would study Torah, and he accepted that out of the lust he had for Rabbi Yochanan's sister. So he tried to, when he got out of the river, he tried putting on his clothing, and he was not able to. He needed help putting on his clothing, even though obviously as a robber you can imagine he was probably a strong built person. But once he accepted upon himself Torah learning for a not so important reason, that Kabbalah, that acceptance weakened him, and he had difficulty putting on his clothing. Okay, the rest of the story is tragic here. He learned Torah, he learned Gemara, and he became a great man. There was debate in the study hall about the following: Hasayef, a sword; a sakin is a knife; Hapagin, v'haroimach. These are, I don't know how they translate it. There are another two types of swords:
spear and hand sickle.
What is that? A spear and a hand sickle.
A knife and a hunting spear.
And a roimach is a
spear and a hand sickle.
Okay. Umagal yad is a sickle. Umagal kotzer is a hand sickle and a sickle for harvest. When exactly are they susceptible for tumah? Okay, so let's explain. When you build a vessel, so raw materials do not accept tumah. They're not susceptible to tumah. Tumah to a vessel will only happen if the vessel is complete. Now, as you might imagine, you watched the journal video about how to make a knife, $20,000 knife. You should watch it.
Writing it down.
What was that?
Layer and layer and layer.
Yeah. But basically, he starts off with a blank sheet of steel, and then he cuts until he gets a knife. Okay, interesting video. It's a recent one. Anyway, so obviously, at what point is it transformed? At what point do you say that now it's a knife? Or at what point do you say, well, it's still raw steel? Right. Not only that, when they make a knife, they usually polish the blade. But the thing is, the polishing makes no difference to the functionality of the knife. So when's it considered the end of its? When is it sort of finished? When's the job done? So Migmar Malachtan, from when the job is done. Even saying Migmar Malachtan, when is the job done? So Rabbi Yochanan says, Mishiyat Sarfin Bekivshon. Once you put it into the furnace to harden it, or in that case, we have to potentially soften it first before it's hardened. Once it's removed from the furnace and you cool it and you harden it, that's when it's finished. Amrlei, so Rabbi Yochanan conceded to Rish Lakish with a little bit of a dig here. He said, Lista yusa yada. A thief knows the vessels of his thievery. Amrlei, so Rish Lakish was insulted by that, and he said, Umaya honestly, what difference does it make? Hasam Rabbi Karli, Hacham Rabbi Karli. And when I was the head of the thieves, they called me the rabbi of the thieves. I was the commander of the thieves. And over here in the study hall, they also called me the commander. They called me a rabbi. Amrlei, so Rabbi Yochanan says, what do you mean? What did I benefit you? I gave you the benefit, the akravinu tachas shchina, tachas kaf shchina. I brought you under the cloak of the shchina, of God's presence, by giving you Torah learning. So Rabbi Yochanan also was a little bit miffed about Rish Lakish's reply, and Cholosh daite Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan got very upset that Rish Lakish sort of replied to him that way, and because of Rabbi Yochanan's sadness, because he was upset, Cholosh Rish Lakish became sick. Asoy achsei kabechino. So remember, the sister of Rabbi Yechanan, right, is married to Rish Lakish. So she comes running to Rish Lakish, and she basically says, Bakya Amr le Asay B'Shul B'ni. She says to him, you have to stop being upset at my husband because your brother-in-law, because otherwise you're going to kill him by being upset at him. So apparently it wasn't enough. So she said, do it for my children, for your nieces and nephews. Amar Allah, he wasn't impressed by that. He says, Ozva Yisaymo, the orphans that are left behind, Ani Achya, I'll support them. So she said, Asay V'Shval Manusi, do it because I don't want to be a widow. Amar Allah Almanusecha, your widowedness, Alai Tiftachu, you can rely on me. And sure enough, Rabbi Yechanan was still upset, and Rish Lakish passed away. The story doesn't get better. It does not. Rabbi Yechanan was extremely upset that he lost his close friend. The rabbi said, who's going to go calm him down? Let Rabbi Elazar ben Pedas go to Mechad and Shmaitze because he's very sharp. So also Yosef Kamei, so he went and he sat down and he started learning with Rabbi Yechanan. Anything Rabbi Yechanan said, he said, oh, I got a brisa, I can support what you're saying. Amar, so he says to him rhetorically, At Kibar Lakisha, do you think you're like Rish Lakish? Have Amina Milsa have him actually Kushisa. When I said something, Rish Lakish would disagree with me by asking me 24 questions. I'd have to give him 24 answers. And then, after going through it from 24 different angles, I knew it much better. And what do you tell me? I got a brisa to support you. It doesn't help me. You think I don't know that I'm saying the correct shot? That I need 24 proofs to support me. Have calls of a karamani. So basically, Rabbi Yechanan went mad. And he started tearing his clothing, the kabachin, he would cry, V'amar hechat bar lakisha, hechat bar lakisha, where are you, Rish Lakish? Where are you, Rish Lakish? He would sit and cry until he lost his mind. The rabbis prayed that he should pass away, and he passed away. Okay. Yeah. Okay. By the way, you should just know, Rabbi Yechanan, as a side point, Rabbi Yechanan was no stranger to suffering. Rabbi Yechanan lost 10 of his children.
Okay, he was the one.
He was the one, if you remember, his Gemara in Brachas used to carry around a bone, a tiny piece of a bone from his 10th child. Anyway. Okay, now we go backwards, and we go back to the story of Rabbi Elazar of Shimon. So you remember Rabbi Elazar of Shimon was extremely large, right? He was a contemporary of Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, and the son of Rabbi Yossi, Shmuel Rabbi Yossi. So let's give a little bit of history here, because it's just important for the next phases of the Gemara. Okay, so we have Rabbi Elazar of Shimon. This Rabbi Elazar of Shimon should not be confused with the students of Rabbi Kiva. That would be Rabbi Elazar ben Aruch or Rabbi Elazar ben Hyrcanus. So Rabbi Elazar of Shimon is the famous. We're talking about Lag Ba'omer here, right? This is the famous Rabbi Elazar that was in the cave together with Rav Shimon bar Yochai. His father was Rav Shimon bar Yochai. So Rabbi Elazar of Shimon is the son of Rav Shimon bar Yochai. Now, so there's a little. No, it's very. I just want to go through this because it could be a little confusing with the names here. He's a contemporary of Rabbi Shimon Karcha. Okay, he's a contemporary of Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yossi. Now remember, Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yossi is also contemporary of Rabbi Yehudah Hanassi. Rabbi Yehudah Hanassi's father has the same name as Shimon. So he's also Rabbi Shimon. Him we call Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. So Rabbi Yehudah is ben Rabbi Shimon ben Rabbi Gamliel. That's a distinct Rav Shimon. Rav Shimon Gamliel is not Rav Shimon bar Yochai, obviously. Okay. Rebbe is a student of Rabbi Yossi. That would be the father of the so-called Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yossi, who remember met Rabbi Elazar in the field, who both of them were extremely large. Okay, so remember there's two Rabbi Shimons here. Okay, and we're talking about the Rabbi Elazar talking about as Rabbi Elazar of Rabbi Shimon. Let's continue here. Okay, so now remember, just review briefly from yesterday. Rabbi Elazar of Shimon became the bounty hunter, right? He catched a thief, and he had this one guy who was a thief. He indicted him maybe on questionable grounds, but it certainly turns out that this guy was a big bad guy, right? And he appears to have raped a betrothed girl in Yom Kippur and was certainly well deserving the death penalty. Then he did this whole operation to show that his fat wouldn't rot, okay, etc.
Right.
Even after that story, the next story is wild. He didn't want to rely on the story to show that he was free of sin. So what did he do? He accepted upon himself tremendous amount of yisurim, of afflictions. He voluntarily accepted to be afflicted with illness. We'll soon see how voluntary this was. It's wild. Okay. B'orta, every night, they would put like these felts, these sheets, like
16 layers.
bandages. They take like gauzes and they put it underneath him because his body would be afflicted with boils. And they would ooze out pus and other types of liquid. Sorry that you're drinking here. For the next morning, these felts, these bandages would be filled, and there were 60 baskets filled with pus, dam of akiva, of blood and pus. His wife would cook for him in the evening these types of beans. I'm sorry, a fig dish, and he would eat it, ubari, and it would give him strength again. Okay, now because of this, well, there's a few reasons. His wife would not allow him to go to the study hall every morning. Why is this? A few reasons. First of all, remember that people hated Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon. Why? Because he was the bounty hunter, right? He would hand over Jews to be killed. Now, by the way, it's interesting. Yesterday, I explained to you that the reason why he handed them over because they were mazikas harabim. And a mazikas harabim, one is allowed to hand over to non-Jews. The arts was another explanation. They argue that there's sort of an executive power that's given to a great rabbi. It's a potential opinion, so it'd be a little bit of a different explanation. I'm not sure why nobody would posit my explanation, because it's interesting. My explanation is given in the Gemara in Gittin, and I believe it's the same. It may even be the same Rabbi Elazar who has that story there. Okay. Anyway, in that story, Rabbi Elazar actually was not allowed to hand them over because these people just had personal animosity. So if somebody gives you a terribly difficult time and does everything illegal and immoral to you, you're not allowed to hand them over to the authorities. It's only when he's mazikas harabim, when he does it on a communal level, he's indiscriminate.
Okay.
So the guy's a mugger, just call the cops on him. Okay, by the way, you have to always add this tshuva for Moshe. It's an epic tshuva. Moshe says that if you see somebody going through a red light, call the police, because the guy is a raidif. He's trying to kill people. So you're certainly allowed to call the police for that. Okay. Okay, so what happened? So his wife didn't want him to go to the study hall because his wife knew that he had a lot of people that hated him, like really hated him. And therefore, we'll soon see how far it went. And therefore, his wife was concerned for his safety, that he shouldn't go to the study hall. There was the other aspect that he was ill every morning. He was terribly ill, so it was a combination of both things. His wife didn't want him to go to the study hall because she was concerned that too much involvement. Obviously, he was the great son of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, incredible scholar, as we'll see later, and very humble as well. Okay. Okay. In the evening, every evening he would say, he would talk to his afflictions, and every evening he would tell his afflictions, my brother, my friends, you can come now. But Safra in the morning, Amrlahu Zilum, they bit the Torah. He says, I have no time for afflictions, now I have to study Torah. So these afflictions happened every night. He'd invite them and then he'd dismiss them. He'd say, I have to learn during the day, and I can't have afflictions. So you have to go. One day his wife heard this. You're bringing she didn't realize this. She says, every day you're bringing this on you. You're getting rid of my father's wealth, because every night we're spending money, crazy amount of money on new clothing for you and all these bandages, and you're ruining your clothing every night. You're wasting my money. You're wasting my father's money. Imrda, she got very mad. She rebelled and she left. She went back to her father's house. Okay, so that day that she left her father's house, what do you think happened? There were these 60 60 captains of ships. Each of them brought 60 slaves. He knocked and each of the slaves carried 60 bags of cash. And they cooked him. They continued his practice, and they cooked him 60 dishes, 60 fig dishes every day. And he ate it, and he was fine. Okay. Now, why exactly did they come to him? So Rashi explains, because they were out at sea and there was a tempest and a storm and threatened to sink the boat, and they prayed to God that just as God protects Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, God should protect them. This is a similar prayer, the famous prayer for Rabbi Balanes. Right, Rabbi Balanes told people to pray to the God of Rabbi Balanes. He's called Rabbi Balanes because he did miracles. Nes is a miracle. So Rabbi the miracle worker. If you as a matter of fact, there's a way for God to hear your prayer is to pray in the name of the God of Meir. Similarly, they prayed in the name of the God of Rabbi Elazar. And as a thanks to Rabbi Elazar, they brought him all these gifts, and they cooked him his food, and he was fine. Yom Echad, one day, his wife was curious, how is he managing? So, go check up on your father. My Ka'avid, what's he doing? My Ka'avid Idna, what's he doing? Asi Amrullah. Zili Amrullah Imach Shalanu Gadol Mishalahem. So she came and she sees her father has 60, hundreds of bags of cash, or thousands of bags of cash. So her father says, go tell your mother I have more wealth than her. Karyan Afshe, he said in himself. So let's just give a little context to this verse here. This is a verse behind a set of verses known as the Eishes Chayil. Most Jews have a custom to read or sing these verses every Friday night. And Eishes Chayil refers to two things. It refers to a woman of valor, but more principally, it refers to Torah. If you remember the Gemara in Site, the Gemara said there's two. Gemara says Eishes Chayil shows the greatness of a Jewish woman. Either it's talking about a Jewish woman or it's talking about Torah, which is even a greater level. Why? Because what's Torah compared to? A Jewish woman. Okay. So in this context here, it refers to Torah. So what did the Torah do for Reb Shimon? It was like the ships of merchandise. From a distance, it provided the bread to Reb Elazar. He ate and drank and he got better. So what do you think? His wife wasn't there to stop him from going to the study hall anymore. So his wife wasn't there to stop him. What do you think he did? Of course, he went. Nafik l'bei madrasha. So he went to the study hall. So they brought him 60. So basically there were 60 women that had sort of menstrual samples shown to Rabbi Elazar. Oh. Now it's just again a little context here. Biblically speaking, only 4 plus 1 colors of blood. Specific colors make a woman tummy. That means if she has a menstrual flow that is not one of these 4 colors, then she's not tummy, even though it's in what you consider a normative flow. Now, today we're not an expert in the colors, and that sort of differentiation is not done anymore. It hasn't been done since Talmudical times already. But in the times of Rabbi Elazar, this is pre-Talmudical times, this is times in the Mishnah already, he was an expert. And at that day, his mind was so clear that all 60 of them, he said, were tahor. Have a Kammarani Rabbanon. The rabbis, were whispering behind his back, and they didn't believe that he was correct. V'amri salka daitach lesbehu chat safek. It's not a possibility that one of the 60 is at least a doubt. At least it's maybe the woman is tummy. Amr lahu, so he heard them snickering behind him. He said, "Im kamaisihu, if I'm right, you kulam scharim, then they should all be male children. V'im lav tehena keva achas beineim, and if I'm wrong, there should be one female amongst the 60. And hayukulam scharim, these were all males. By the way, I should note that this is not the same Rabbi Elazar that we had on Daf Samach Tes. That Rabbi Elazar, I believe, was Rabbi Elazar ben Horkinus, who was a student of Rabbi Kiva, well over a generation before Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon. Then Rabbi Shimon was a full generation. Rabbi Shimon again was a student of Rabbi Kiva, just like Rabbi Elazar ben Horkinus. They were contemporaries. I'm sorry. What am I saying? I'm sorry. Sorry. I totally messed up generation. No. Rabbi Elazar ben Horkinus was a student of Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Elazar ben Aruch was a student of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. I get confused. I mentioned different Elazar earlier. He was not a student of Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva's student was Rabbi Elazar ben Horkinus, along with Rabbi Shimon ben Chai. Okay. So it's a generation before. That would be the Rabbi Elazar was generation before Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. Okay. Okay, Vasikul Reb Elazar al Shmei, and all these children, all these 60 children that were born, the parents all called the child Reb Elazar. Okay. Tanya Amar Rabbi Kamma Priv Rivi Bitla Rishazu Me Yisrael. The fact that Reb Elazar had to serve as the bounty hunter, you can imagine how much reproduction it removed. Meaning, had Reb Elazar been more frequently around, he could have answered more questions, and it would have resulted in more children. Now, when Reb Elazar dies, Amar Lo L'Dvisayo Yudana B'Drabana D'Rasichi Alai. Reb Elazar knew that people hated him, like they really, really hated him, and he was concerned about being buried because he was afraid his grave would be his gravesite would be vandalized. The people that hate him would not give him the appropriate respect in his burial. So I guess his wife came back to him. He told his wife, Ugnin be'elisoi, put me in the attic, and don't worry about it. And that's what she did. He died in secret. His wife put him in a casket and put him in the attic. How long was she in the attic? Amr Shlomo Nachmani said, the mother of Rabbi Yehudah told me, that the wife of Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, told him, between 18 and 22 years, Rabbi Elazar was in the attic, dead. Her testimony was when she would go up to the attic, she would look at him. His body was so fresh that if a hair got pulled out, blood would show. One day she saw a bug leaving his ear. She went crazy. She went like she was deeply perturbed that her righteous husband would have even a bug touching him. It was a worm, whatever. So Ischazle B'chalma, Rabbi Elazar came to her in a dream. Amar Li, he told me, this is the woman talking, the wife, don't worry about it. It's nothing. One day I heard somebody disparaging a young scholar, and I did not protest like I should have, and that's why I'm punished. Don't worry about it. My body's not going to rot. If two people wanted a judgment, have a Kamma above it, they'd stand on the threshold of the house. Each of them would say their story. So a voice would come out of the attic. You are guilty, you are not guilty. One day his wife got into an argument with a neighbor. The neighbor said to her, I guess this was sort of not very well known, even though people would come for a resolution, but not everybody knew that Rabbi Elazar was in the attic. But she was a neighbor, she knew. So she cursed her. She said to Hey Kabbalah, you should be like your husband that doesn't get buried. Amri, and this people found out about this insult. At this point, this is not acceptable anymore. It's not in the honor of Rabbi Shimon that he sit in the attic and the neighbor use him as an insult to his wife. Some say Rabbi Shimon Yochai, the father of Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, came to the rabbis in a dream. I have one son amongst you, and you don't want to bring him to me. Again, where's Rabbi Shimon Yochai buried? Obviously, we know where he's buried, right? In Miron. So the rabbis tried to inter the body of Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon in the cave in Miron where Rabbi Shimon is buried. They're buried together in the same cave. The people of Achbaria, that town, would not allow Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon to be taken out. Kol shani dahavanayim Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon. All the 18 to 22 years Rabbi Shimon was in the attic. A wild animal never entered town. On the day of Erev Yom Kippur, people have a treaty. People were very busy, obviously, as you can imagine. Erev Kippur people are very busy. So what they do? They had the people of Biri, a nearby town. There was interesting. There is a town near Tzfat called Be'eri, which I don't think is built on the historical town, but maybe it is. I don't know. They took the coffin of Rabbi Elazar and they interred it in Lama'arta Davua, in the cave of his father. That's the cave where the pilgrimage happens in Lag BaOmer. That's the cave of Rabbi Shimon. Ashkechula achna the hadrulei lamarta. They found a snake that was what's it called? It was what's the thing encircling? What? Coiled. It had it was a snake that was coiled up at the entrance to the cave. Amr lahu, so they said to the snake, achna paschi picha v'chanes ben eitzel aviv. Open your mouth. And notice, so the snake was coiled up. His mouth was on his tail, right? Common motif, and they couldn't get into the cave. He said, "Open your mouth and move to the side so that the son can enter his father." So the snake allowed them to enter. Sholach Rebbe l'tar Rebbe Ishtay. So Rebbe apparently Rebbe's wife had Rebbe had lost his wife earlier as well, and Rebbe wanted to consider talking to the wife of Rebbe Elazar Reb Shimon, their contemporaries, potentially as a mate. Potentially consider getting married. So Sholach Alei, so she responded back to him that she wasn't going to have of it. The wife of a scholar is going to be now the wife of a simple man. And by the way, this is said about Rabbi Yehudah Nasi as being chayil, as being the non-holy one. And the reason why she called her husband the holy one is because most specifically because he went through a tremendous amount of tragedy in his life. Don't forget, he was also in the cave 13 years with Reb Shimon, right? And with no clothing, right? They didn't want their clothing to get ruined. They would sit in the sand, covered themselves in sand for 12 years. It said that it took quite a doctor to heal them when they came out. That's the Gemara in Shabbos of Gimel. Okay. Taman Amrinan ba'asa demori beisa tola zayna kulbareya kulisa. I'm sorry. Another version of this is ba'asa demori beisa tola zayna in a place where the general hung his medals of bravery. Kulbaraya kulsi tola. Do you think that we're going to allow a shepherd to hang his stick from it? It's degrading. Sholach law. So Rabbi wasn't too offended by that, and he responded to her, "Nay, the Torah gadol mimeni. It's true that he's greater than me in Torah. Is he greater than me in action? I've done greater actions than he has." So Sholach alei. So she responds to him, Look, I don't know how great he was in Torah. I don't exactly talk to him in Torah learning an entire day. But you're confessing that he was greater in Torah. So fine, that's your confession. However, one thing I do know, I know his actions. His actions were greater than yours because he's accepted upon himself tremendous affliction in his life. But Torah Mahi, how do we know he was greater than Torah? So Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, this is the father of Rabbi Yehudah Hanasi, and Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. Rabbi Shua ben Karcha is a contemporary of the father of Rabbi. Asafsli. They're sitting on chairs. And remember, Rabbi Shua ben Karcha is the one that rebuked Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon for becoming a bounty hunter. So they were sitting on chairs and they were teaching the students. And among their students, Yasek Kamaya, Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon, Rabbi Yehudah Hanasi and Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon were sitting a'ara on the floor. Makshim Mefarku. And they were very engaged in the discussion. Amri, the rabbi said, I'm sorry, the rabbis, meaning the rabbis on the chairs, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel and Rabbi Shua ben Karcha, they said, look, these are the two best students. They've given us so much in their back and forth of the discussion. Are we going to allow them to sit on chairs? They made them. We can allow them to sit on the floor, so they made them chairs, and they put them onto chairs. Askinu, they put them on chairs. Amr lahen Reb Shimon Gamliel. Reb Shimon Gamliel said about, so you have the father and son both sitting on chairs. The father didn't want his son to be on a chair. So pray to achas yeshli benechem va'atem v'akshem lovda himeni. Achsul Rebbe. So Reb Shimon Gamliel was concerned that the ayin hara, the evil eye, of that the fact that he was a young scholar and he was being put up on a chair when everybody else was on the ground, he didn't want him to suffer from that. So he said, put him back down on the floor. Achsul Rebbe, they put him down, they put Rebbe back on the floor. Amr lahen Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. Rabbi Shua ben Karcha says, Misha yesh le'av yechi, Misha ein le'av yamos. So Rabbi Shua ben Karcha says, hold on a second. This looks terrible. Because in other words, Rebbe's father was alive. He was sitting there on the chair. So because his father was alive, he's concerned for him and puts him back down on the floor. Now, Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon's father had long passed away. So what are people going to say? If somebody has a father, then they live because they're protected from the evil eye. But somebody without a father, Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon was an orphan at the time, he shouldn't live because his father's not there to put him back down, to humble him and put him back down on the ground. It's not respectable. So Asunam Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon, they put Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon on the floor as well. Cholosh Daite. Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon was hurt by this. He said, "You're equating me to you," meaning Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon held he was much greater than Rabbi Yehudah Hanasi. Until that day, when Rabbi would say something, Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon would support him. Basically, whenever Rabbi Yehudah Hanasi was about to talk, Rabbi Elazar would say, "This is what you want to say," and then he'd ask a question on it. So he'd sort of intuit exactly what Rabbi would say, and then he'd question it. Eventually started asking him questions that weren't serious. So Rabbi was hurt by this. He didn't like that. He didn't like being offended like this. So also he went to his father and said, "What should I do?" So his father, this would be Rav Shimon Gamliel, the father of Yehudah Hanasi. Don't worry about it. He's a lion, the son of a lion, meaning he's Rabbi Elazar and his father is Rav Shimon. You know, they're both mighty people. V'ato Ari ben Shul, but you are a lion, the son of a fox, meaning I am a scholar, but I'm not as great as Rav Shimon Refai. The Hainu Damar Rebbe, and this is what Rebbe famously said: Shloisha an v'sonin hein. There are three humble people. These are the three people. Abba, my father from this story, because my father called himself vinegar. Called himself a fox. He called himself not great in Torah study, and that's how he seriously considered himself. Ubnei Beseira, the students, the sons of Beseira, when Hillel HaZaken posited a resolution for how the shechita knife would be brought on Erev Pesach, which was an Erev Shabbos, the Bnei Beseira humbled themselves and removed themselves from leadership. They appointed a youngster who came from a distant country, that would be Hillel, to be the leader. So because they humbled themselves, that's another example of the great humble people. The Yonasan ben Shaul and Yonasan, the son, Jonathan, the son of King Saul, that he handed the kingship to King David. So the Gemara says, they put a hill and they appointed him as the leader, as the ex-large, the prince. Jonathan, the son of Saul, Jonathan ben Shaul, he said, "You'll be the king, and I'll be your servant," even though he should have been the king. So the Gemara says, who says, Dilma Jonathan ben Shaul David. Maybe Jonathan ben Shaul was engaging in strategy. He saw that people liked David to be the next king, so strategically he was smart. He said, "Okay, I'll move to the side, but give me sort of a big position in the government." And furthermore, they saw that Hillel was smarter than them. That's why they made room. They departed the position of leadership and they made way for Hillel. Certainly, it was the case that Rav Shimon Gamliel was extremely humble. Okay, and tomorrow we talk about the two difficulties that Rebbe suffered in his lifetime, and then, of course, Rebbe died from illness. That would have been the third one. Okay. Yes. Soon. It's actually